Hello everybody. Welcome back for another video. Hope you're all doing fantastic and that you're all having a great day. Ledger currently has 10% off their Ledger Family Pack X, the Pack S family, as well as the Ledger Backup Pack as well. And they also have, wait, I'm going to get to it. Wait for a second. Wait, they have a lot of products, as well as the Ledger gift card for that special someone in your life who you want to be able to get into the cryptocurrency market. It's a nice way to give a gift. I do not work for Ledger, but I am an affiliate. Therefore, the affiliate link in the description below. We need to have a serious talk, and this isn't a joke at all. This isn't like a whatever. I'm fairly certain you saw the title of this video. Yeah, no. So, no, that's real. And I'm going to explain to you exactly what's going on and why, question mark. If you've been here for the last couple of weeks, you have noticed maybe a light shift in the videos. We tend to get a lot of price predictions for the cryptocurrency market. Where's Bitcoin going? What's going to happen in 4 weeks, 8 weeks? What's happening in summertime? What's happening by the end of the year? For whatever the reason, maybe it's literally just the time for this to actually take place. We're getting a lot of discussions now about the end of the US dollar. This is typically a very common and I dare say normal theme within the cryptocurrency space, where one of the ideas is the reason why we have Bitcoin is because fiat currencies are terrible, because of the banking system, because of greed and corruption. And this is why I say over and over and over, it's a shame that we don't have a lot more people in the cryptocurrency market who would greatly benefit from actually owning Bitcoin, something that is not controlled or created directly by a government entity around the world. You know, literally decentralized, fair and free use. The last 2 or 3 weeks, there's been a heavy tizzy, it's not a light tizzy, revolving around the United States dollar, the Federal Reserve, debt levels, and U.S. tariffs. If you haven't kept up with it, it's totally understandable. There's a lot going on at the exact same time. We had a video about a month ago, maybe a little bit less, where one of the topics was the head of BlackRock, once again, Larry Fink. I almost said Michael James. That I don't know where that even came from. He announced and said that if the U.S. doesn't get its debt levels under control, it is going to be usurped. It is going to be pushed to the side and will no longer be a world reserve currency. It'll just simply be, what have you. And he said if it doesn't, shape up, Bitcoin is going to take over in its place. The last 2 weeks, we've had an increased amount of news about the anticipation of the US dollar basically being hyper devalued because of trade disputes, because of the tariffs. If you haven't seen, a lot of countries since around February have begun to rapidly move away from the US dollar. You'll normally see some de-dollarization or people discussing, hey, we're going to do 1% more. We're going to make sure that we're moving away. But there's now an increase in countries who are mining Bitcoin and accumulating Bitcoin. We know that because of all the other news that we've had, especially recently, where we heard that Binance is actively working with a large number of countries who are slowly looking to get away from the US dollar, who are looking to accumulate Bitcoin and increase their cryptocurrency country policies and all these other kinds of things. On top of that, the countries who are using the US dollar are also moving away as well, and we've heard that a large amount of sovereign wealth funds, through multiple videos, are also gearing up to buy huge amounts of Bitcoin because of this shift away from the US dollar. I saw this article and I thought it was a joke, and it wasn't a joke at all. It's actually from Forbes. And I was like, what in the world is happening? This is why I said, like, we have to have an actual talk because something is taking place. I was talking before about the whole magic trick thing, where I think we collectively have been told this idea that like everything is kind of fine, everything is okay, no one's buying Bitcoin, Bitcoin's not the target right now, no one's interested, no one's accumulating. And then we started having news the last 2 weeks that the amount of Bitcoin, if you missed it, the amount of Bitcoin on crypto exchanges hasn't been this low since November 2018. I think around an additional 300 or 400,000 Bitcoin were purchased by companies in the last couple of months. There are, I think, a handful of whale entities who have purchased and are purchasing 300 times the amount of Bitcoin that's mined per day. And there's a bunch of other metrics that I'm also missing. And it's getting to the point where I wonder if we're getting kind of droplets of a larger bucket that's being turned over of behind the scenes. And I mean, even in front of our faces, that people are literally making sure that they leave and get away from the US dollar for Bitcoin. I'm going to show you the article. It gets a bit intense, but all the words were actually there. You'll see exactly what I'm talking about. It says Bitcoin has bounced back this week alongside tech stocks after a leak revealed serious establishment fears of crypto contagion. The Bitcoin price surged towards $100,000 per coin as one closely watched crypto investor calls the market bottom, telling people to buy everything ahead of a Federal Reserve flip. Now, as Binance chief executive confirms wild speculation that could blow up the price of Bitcoin, major US dollar warnings are priming Bitcoin for a geopolitical fragmentation megaforce shock. See? All the words were actually there. The contagion, as far as we know, for those of you who haven't seen, is that other countries basically realized that something is wrong with the US dollar. The second part is the idea that the US is going to be accumulating Bitcoin. I told you the significance of that multiple times. The main focal point is that the US would not be using this money on infrastructure, on this, on that, on so and so, on strengthening the US dollar in some sort of way. They're using it to buy Bitcoin. Other countries have been front-running the United States to try and get as much as they possibly can. We have a brand new company that just announced that they are going to be based exclusively in Bitcoin. They're going to be dropping a whole bunch of other things on literally on top of Bitcoin. And the main focus is to make money to buy more Bitcoin. MicroStrategy has purchased nearly 400,000 Bitcoin since November on top of their stash as they get closer to, at the time of me making this video, get closer to 600,000 Bitcoin for one company. We heard recently from Binance, from the CEO, from a worker inside, and also from Changpeng Zhao that they are working with tons of countries right now, as I just said, who are all trying to get away from the US dollar and are trying to accumulate Bitcoin instead. Thus, the geopolitical fragmentation megaforce shock. It sounds, I don't even know what that's supposed to sound like. It just sounds like a Pokemon move or something else at this point. The speculation still remains, for those of you who don't know, that in May, July, September, November, these are the months that we've been told by a number of banks that the Fed is going to shift their policy and is going to lower interest rates and begin to print more money. We're basically here, as it were. Why is there so much blank space on this website? Okay. All right. Okay. It says, and I quote, "The preconditions are now in place for the beginning of a major dollar downtrend. This was said by Deutsche Bank analyst George Saravelos and Tim Barker, both wrote in a report from MarketWatch, pointing to a huge shift in U.S. trade policy and a global reassessment. A global reassessment of U.S. geopolitical leadership and predicting the end of a higher for longer dollar. The U.S. dollar has been supported in recent months by Fed Chair Jerome Powell's relatively hawkish approach to interest rates in the face of inflation fears. Though U.S. President Donald Trump has piled pressure on Powell to cut rates, it's because things are looking too hot. And I mean, once again, the people like to pretend that this doesn't exist. If you lower interest rates, it's going to raise inflation. This will be great for people who have assets, but everyone else is fudged. Thus, at the beginning of the article, buy everything. It says, and I quote, "Given the historical developments of the last few months, our euro to US dollar forecasts now anticipate the dollar entering a long-winded down cycle." This was written by the Deutsche Bank analyst. "In a world of extreme uncertainty and rapidly shifting policy norms, the risk of market dislocations and regime breaks remain high." The warning echoes the concerns of Goldman Sachs' head of FX, who told Bloomberg last week, or this week, that the US dollar's weakness is here to stay as the world adjusts to the new tariff-based international trade order established by Trump. Meanwhile, Jay Jacobs, the head of thematics and active exchange traded funds at the world's largest asset manager, BlackRock, has predicted geopolitical fragmentation will be a megaforce that drives the world forward over the next several decades. Directly related to that geopolitical fragmentation is the rise of Bitcoin, as people see more disestablishment and the need for alternative assets. Jacob said during an interview with CNBC, and adding that Bitcoin's price is decoupling from technology stocks. I told you, I saw this and I was like, what in the world is going on? It feels like a literal earthquake is happening like in the world, and very few people are actually paying attention to it. And I think the only reason why we are getting any wind of this is because we're actually heavily intertwined into finance. I told you before earlier, the entire reason why crypto has been in a downtrend or didn't go up or was having issues has been because of the tariffs. The tariffs on top of everything have actually caused, once again, people don't like to talk about it, a number of financial allies are rapidly moving away from the US dollar and from the US, and they're finding like other big players to basically shake hands with. On top of that, we keep getting tons of news. I mean, it's not just from Binance. Remember the whole Jack Mallers thing, the Jack Dorsey, what's these other people? There's like 18 people who keep telling us that like constantly they are talking to other world leaders around the world who are like, hey, we need to get in on this. Remember earlier this year, this was in January, when we heard it was Max Kaiser, Michael Saylor, and there was someone else who said, no, like we've been in constant discussion with leaders from around the world, especially those in the Middle East. Remember, we got the news, for those of you who missed that video. We found out that Abu Dhabi has at least, back in January, Abu Dhabi has at least $500 million worth of Bitcoin themselves. That's not including any other country around the world who's also rapidly been making sure that they have proper cryptocurrency regulations. Something weird is happening, and I think that May is going to kind of open the door for all of this stuff to actually come to the light. It is incredibly odd to hear from BlackRock, Goldman Sachs, Deutsche Bank, Bank of America, JP Morgan Chase, and there was another bank who have all announced in sequence, week after week, the dollar's not looking good. The dollar's going to continue to be devalued. People are moving away from the dollar, and that Bitcoin's going to take over and take its place. When I keep saying it's a shame that we don't have more people in this market, we are witnessing the literal wealth transfer right now. Why do you think the amount of Bitcoin on exchanges hasn't been this low since November 2018? Who's buying up all this Bitcoin? Countries, corporations, entities. But and I stick to my numbers. By the time we get May, June, July, August, September, October, November. Oh yeah. By the time we get to December, MicroStrategy is going to have over 1 million Bitcoin. Easily. Like, there's no real discussion in my head, and that will have wiped out, completely cleaned out all the actual liquid Bitcoin left on crypto exchanges, because in case you've also been missing it, the inflows to the ETFs last week was over $3 billion. And that's with a consistent amount of Bitcoin constantly being purchased up. Yeah, no, I wasn't joking. I told you the title had a purpose. It was because of the literal words that were being used in this article. Very interesting times ahead. I obviously don't know what's going to happen, but if everyone's pointing at the same thing, talking, I mean, this is every single analyst as well. We hear from the big names, we hear from the big players, because they tend to hold more weight. But everyone's like, no, like the US dollar is like basically done. Like, we have one of the main things when I got into, and I told you, it's very weird. It's weird experiencing what somebody told you was going to happen years ago. This also lines up. For those of you who were not here, this was a major topic of discussion around, I want to say the end of last year, maybe summer to end of last year. It was kind of because of everything kind of lining up. This is when I was first researching about crypto and getting into the space. And once again, everything that Andreas Antonopoulos was saying, it all sounded insane. It didn't make any sense. He said we would start to see with slower adoption, then we start to hear like a couple of companies were getting into the space. We'd start hearing about smaller countries adopting. He said at that point behind the scenes, I'm telling you, watch Andreas Antonopoulos' older videos from 2013, 14, 15, and 16, maybe even 2017, but those 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, around those years when he was giving conferences. It's really weird because he would be in a room with hundreds of seats and like 12 of them were filled. That's it. He said you start hearing about small countries adopting it, and what you would actually see is that bigger countries behind the scenes would begin to accumulate Bitcoin as well, but they wouldn't tell anyone. They would simply play it off and go, that smaller country, they have no idea what they're doing. At some point, he said that Bitcoin would become corporatized. Bitcoin would get ETFs, which he called paper Bitcoin, and this would cause institutions to rapidly rush in because they would realize exactly how rare that Bitcoin was. He said we'd see a major movement up in Bitcoin, and this would coincide with the US dollar actually collapsing. And now, once again, 12, 13, 14 years ago, I was like, oh, this guy's he's a little cuckoo in the head, but I stuck around. He said, you'll see the US dollar begin to collapse, and this will cause all countries to rapidly rush into Bitcoin. He said we'd still have stragglers at that point, and many of the stragglers would actually be retail. It would be normal people, as I keep saying, who wouldn't really understand everything that's going on because they're not really getting it. He said hyper-Bitcoinization starts to come in when you hear other governments start pricing things in Bitcoin. And I think at this point, we're about 5 to 10 years away from that. Like a literal 5 to 10 years. If you didn't see, Cathie Wood or ARK Invest recently upped their Bitcoin price prediction for 2030. Their original number was $500,000. And then they said there are far too many companies and institutions into the space. So they rose their prediction for the year 2030 to 1.2 million. They said a couple of days ago with the introduction of the ETFs and the sovereign wealth funds and the entities in the countries who are buying Bitcoin, they said by the year 2030, they're anticipating a $2.4 million Bitcoin. That's 4.5 years away. Yes. Something really crazy is happening, and I think we're going to see it this year. I don't think there's going to be a delay, given the way that the news has been going and all the things that we've been seeing. but I think this is kind of it. And it's a little weird, as I stated before, because we're witnessing not only history, but the end of the US dollar. The end of the US dollar literally means the end of the global order that we were all born into. And it means a gigantic shift of power and money and wealth and energy and focus as to where things are going to go. Yeah, so, I'll tell you the truth. I've been, I've been buying, I've upped my buys the last couple of weeks because it's a bit too on the nose at this point. Everything is kind of screaming in one direction. I think the biggest indicator is what happens this month. Like, I think this is the doorway. If we hear that the Fed lowers interest rates, it's basically like game over for the US dollar. Inflation will come roaring back, as will the prices of assets. The cryptocurrency market is going to surge. Also, the predictions that we're still getting for May are what was it? I think it was a $130,000 Bitcoin, but it might even go higher than that. Yeah, that's the geopolitical fragmentation megaforce shock news. There's a lot happening, as always, within crypto, and please make sure that you are prepared. The last thing I want to hear, and I say this out of annoyance, the last thing I want to hear from any of you is when Bitcoin goes to $1 million, you posting in the comment section that you don't have enough. Yeah. Let's move on. This was also, I want to say, popular news, but also more question mark news. Charles Hoskinson has recently been in the news a lot. Charles Hoskinson has become a champion, a friend of Ripple, of XRP, of Bitcoin as of late, as well as Cardano is trying to merge with these chains. Charles Hoskinson is trying to get Ripple's stablecoin minted on top of Cardano, and Cardano is trying to be one of the layers that allows Bitcoin to be staked and to also have passive income. And it makes a lot of sense. If you get wind, this man has clearly been in a room before with some of these world leaders, and he knows what's coming. If you can make sure, and I say it this way, if all the world leaders keep saying Bitcoin, Ethereum, XRP, Ethereum, Bitcoin, and you don't hear your coin's name, and you realize that you can offer Bitcoin a way to get passive income, you basically allow your chain to remain around forever. Like it will be one of the ways that people will choose to get money from Bitcoin. However, he's back in the news this time with something that confused and perplexed a lot of people. I think I understand it, but also there's a lot of skepticism revolving around a lot of it. Charles Hoskinson has claimed that the original timeline for Cardano, like there used to be this long line on the website, on the Cardano website, that showed all the upgrades and the updates and the date when this would happen, and this was going to take place, and this is going to so-and-so, and Voltaire is going to have this. He has claimed that apparently all of that is completed. Charles Hoskinson's claim of a completed Cardano faces community skepticism over unmet scalability goals. For those of you who do not know, the idea for every blockchain was originally 60,000 transactions per second. Now you might sit there and wonder, why not 50,000? Why not 100,000? Why not 1 million transactions per second? It's because Visa does 60,000 transactions per second. 60,000. So the idea from years ago has been, if you can get your chain, one chain, to do more than Visa, Well, gosh darn it, you have the brand new Visa that everyone is going to be using. This is one of the skepticism questions revolving around Ethereum. The idea of Ethereum back in 2015 was that by 2017, we would already have Ethereum 2.0, which would allow us to have around 10,000 transactions per second. By the time we got to 2017, we heard that by 2020, we would have Ethereum 2.0, which would give us 500,000 transactions per second. By the time we got to 2024, we had staking, but nothing else. Ethereum's transaction speed, I don't know the exact number. I think they're doing one of those, we batch a bunch of transactions per second kind of thing now, which doesn't really help because investors need numbers. I don't care how many can be batched into one transaction. How quick is that one transaction? How many of them are you actually doing? Cardano's founder, Charles Hoskinson, recently claimed that the project's original roadmap was already fulfilled in 2020, igniting intense community scrutiny over its scaling capabilities. Cardano was supposed to be a rival to Ethereum and actually usurp it completely. But that, I mean, we've heard thousands of coins say that. It was Cardano, it was Tron, it was EOS, it was Solana. You name it. They've all had the exact same claim. We can go past Ethereum and do better, yada, yada, yada. But hearing that apparently this was done back in 2020 is not true. The statement has raised concerns among community members regarding Cardano's readiness for widespread adoption, given the persistent challenges related to scalability. In response to growing criticisms, Hoskinson highlighted the risks associated with the IOG's funding model, suggesting that inadequate financial backing could lead to staffing changes. That is interesting and probably should not have been said out loud. The fact that he even thought of mentioning that they need more money, and that because they don't have the amount of money that they want or need, they could lead. Staffing changes means firings. I'm going to give it to you this way. A number of years now, I'm not perfect with money. No one is. I buy Pokemon cards for fun. I could be investing it in crypto, but I like Pikachus. Wow. Okay. Awesome. Cool. No one's perfect with money. However, a large number of the big wigs in the cryptocurrency space, I can't begin to imagine what they're actually doing with money. A number of years ago, Justin Sun, the guy who created Tron, spent $100 million US dollars on buying BitTorrent. You know, the thing that no one uses anymore? He also spent, there was $100 million on something else as well. This was a very big thing years ago. All these people were spending 50 million, 100 million, 87 million on companies and acquisitions, and none of these things had actually ended up working. My point is, a lot of these companies from around 2018 to 2023, there were a lot of news stories that a lot of them were going broke and they didn't have the money and they were letting off staff, or they didn't have a way to actually pay developers. And I remember saying in the nicest way possible, if you had taken that $100 million that you used to buy BitTorrent and put it into any investment vehicle, I mean, literally anything that gave you a 5% return, you would have made $5 million for doing absolutely nothing. You know how many developers you can pay with $5 million, even if you give them a substantial, and I mean like a good $250,000 per year. That's a good amount of people with big brains you can have working on your project, and that's assuming that they take $250,000 as like a mega developer blockchain engineer. So yeah, I think there's been a lot of not Cardano in particular, but a lot of mismanagement of funds in the cryptocurrency space because sure, why not? So the news is apparently Cardano was finished in 2020. We'll see. I still have, the word's not high hopes, but I assume that they will get it together in some sort of way. I think Cardano is going to look fundamentally different in the coming years. I think it will simply be like an additional layer that does something for other chains. I think the like working on its own is kind of done. And I say that because we keep hearing the same coins over and over from world leaders and from mega banks and institutions. I think they've kind of chosen where they want to invest their money. But yeah, I thought this was also quite interesting. All right, guys and gals out there, that's going to do it for this video. Something big is happening. Something is coming. Something is going to change crypto forever. I don't know exactly what it is, but it is kind of lightly freaking me out that we keep hearing from all these mega banks who are like, hey, so the thing that you're all using is about to collapse and they're going to be replacing it with Bitcoin. So, yeah. Well, hope you all enjoyed. Hope you all are having a great day. Morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are, wherever the heck you might be. I do hope it is absolutely fantastic. Thank you all once again for watching, listening, liking, commenting, and supporting. And I will most certainly be talking to you all soon. See you.